Hey guys, my name is Greg Atkinson. I'm the founder of the First Impressions Conference, and I'm excited about this session on church planning and first impressions. And I've asked two friends of mine, Josh and Casey, to share what it is like in the early days and still leading a church plant. And so, Josh, if you would just introduce yourself, tell us about who you are, where you are, when you planted, and then we'll let Casey introduce himself.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Greg. So I'm in Tucson, Arizona, out on the West Coast, or at least like 6 hours from the West Coast. And we planted back in 2008, started with 11 people, our very last preview service. And two of those 11 were first-time guests to our preview service. And we've just seen God do a lot of great things over the years out here in Tucson. The West is a fun area to plant a church. It's different than the Midwest and the Bible Belt. But yeah, so.
Very cool. Casey, tell us about you and where you are and when you planted.
Yeah, so I'm in North Houston, Texas area, in the Woodlands area, which is a suburb. And we planted a little over 7 years ago. We launched our first public service and started out with about 25 people or so. And before that, we were meeting in our apartment. And then eventually moved to two locations, two apartments. We had one apartment for childcare and one apartment for our core group meetings. And then when we launched, like I said, about 25, 30 people. You know, the first day you launch, you have like 70 people show up, and then it cuts in more than half the next week. And you as a planter, if you have experienced church planting, you understand that that's just par for the course. The people that are launching with you, if you don't manage their expectations, they think something has grossly gone wrong. And so it was a fun time and just began to grow. And we're now in our third location, still a mobile church, and very much into the topic that we'll be discussing today on figuring out best ways to welcome people and to create a hospitable environment. So glad to be a part of this and hope to be an encouragement to pastors and planters out there.
Yeah, and you guys are going to be a great encouragement. So you both started relatively small. Josh, 11 people, Casey, 20-something. From the very beginning, when you are leading up to your launch, and I've worked with a lot of church planners over the years, I know the heart and soul and vision casting that goes into that. As you are preparing for your launch, and then like you said, Casey, you may have 70 on week one, a lot of well-wishers, then you drop down. But as you are getting ready to launching and moving forward, how do you cast vision of, we want to be hospitable, we want to be a welcoming church, we want to have this outward focus of, come here, you're welcome, you're welcome, you're welcome, come hear the good news. But Josh, you started with 11 people. How do you cast that vision as a lead pastor of let's be as hospitable as possible?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it just comes out of the lead pastor's life and just whether or not they're hospitable. I mean, most church planters are pretty good at having people into their home or, sitting around a table with people. So I feel like hospitality for a lot of planters kind of just comes out of them. It's just a big part of their life. I mean, even from our very first services, we would have a table with gift bags on it from our very first service. And we would talk about, giving something to people before we asked for something, as kind of a way to break down a barrier for people. So that was ingrained in the culture of our church from the very beginning. Sending people a Starbucks gift card as a thank you for coming. I mean, we did that way before we were self-sufficient as a church. And that was hard because you sat there and you looked at, I'm sending these $5 gift cards out to people. I'm working 5 jobs, but when it's something you believe in and when it's something that's part of the core of who you are as a person, it makes it easier to do in your church. And then everybody else just gets the idea, that this is something we do.
That's good. That's good. Casey, how do you cast vision when you start in the 20s? You've got 20-something people and you know where you're going, where you have a heart as a lead pastor and a church planner of, one day we're going to reach the Woodlands. One day we're going to reach our community. How do you cast that vision from day one
It's like selling a box of air for people, especially like pre-launch when you're trying to recruit people to, to a church plant, especially if they don't have experience in church planting. And so when you have a core group about 20, 25 people, you talk about, John 13:35, they will know that you are my disciples by the way that you love one another. And having that idea that, hey, we want to love people well, regardless of where they are. I was looking at a picture of our first preview service, and we had like 4 greeters out with handouts and, a couple other people lined up. We had coffee and donuts and, people kind of strategize. And literally half the people that showed up the second week were part of hospitality or greeting and developing that. And so I think you can overkill it at times where it's like a swarm of people on other people. And so you have to coach your people saying like, hey, if you see Bob over there talking to a new person, and it makes sense for you to walk over, go ahead, but like, don't be weird. And you have to have honest conversations with people because people, especially, it's weird, like extroverts like me, I attract introverts for some weird reason. Like I have a few other extroverted people, but I have to like coach people still on like, hey, go say hi to that person and tell them your name and ask them their name and make them talk about the thing they care about the most, which is themselves. And, basic coaching like that. And I don't say it as condescendingly, but I'm saying it on this video just to emphasize the point that early on, it's going to be consistent. People matter to God, therefore they matter to us. And we hit that over and over again. We too, still to this day, send a $5 gift card to Starbucks as a thank you and a thank you card, reach out to them, send phone calls, all that, because, the hospitality isn't just when they walk in the door. The hospitality is in your assimilation process as well. How do you want to serve people? How do you want to bless people? How do you want to invite them to more of Jesus through your assimilation process? And so all those pieces are important elements from the very get-go, and modeling that for your people as well. I think as a pastor, it's tempting for some of us to want to disappear behind the curtain, for those of us who met in a public school with the stage and go pray and get focused and all that kind of stuff. But early on when you're planting, it's like, you better wake up earlier and recharge because it's game day when you show up and start welcoming people as well. And so the way I do that, since I'm more, kind of personable and all that, is I'll connect them with people I think might be a match. Hey, Bob, this is Jeremy. And Jeremy, both you guys work in oil. This is going on. I thought you'd have this in common. You both drive big trucks and shoot deer, whatever, right? Texas.
That's good. That's good. I lived 5 years in Dallas, so I understand and appreciate that Texas is its own country. And so
yes.
We understand.
We are the United State of Texas.
That's right. That's right. Now, you touched on a couple things that both of you did that I want to go back to. One, you talked about assimilation. You both send out $5 gift cards. I learned that years ago from Nelson Searcy, his book Fusion. And as a campus pastor at a multi-site church, I would send out a $5 Subway card or Sonic or Starbucks. But so you both from the very beginning had assimilation processes. And then Casey, you said something in passing that I've joked about a lot. I have a Facebook group, Weekend Worship and Guest Services Facebook group, where we talk about Sunday every day. We talk about first impressions and hospitality. And you said something in passing that I've said, and that's don't be weird. Don't be weird. You can overwhelm people. You can smother people.
We've had that happen. I mean, we've had guys, with sales backgrounds or whatever, that would go and just latch on. And I mean, we've had people who had a passion for marriage ministry and they didn't really know how to organically like invite people into that. They would like take them to lunch. Hey, we'd love to buy lunch after church. And then 8 hours later, they're in those people's business. And so you have to come back and kind of say, hey, that's probably second date material. Cause I mean, we've lost a lot of people early on because our hospitality was a bit too hospitable in the sense of it was too encroaching on people. And so I think an important sub point on that is know your context. Our context is very independent, middle class, upper middle class, and upper class. And so going from we only transact with people to deeply relating with people, you've got to have, because you can't have someone say, hey, I'm Bob, welcome to Christ Community Church. If you died tonight, where would you go? Right.
Right.
And I've had a few friends in my time since coming to faith 20 plus years ago that had just a prophetic evangelistic gift that way. And people would just start weeping and like, I don't know, I need Jesus. Right. And they're saved. But by and large, it's just strange, like and so I think being mindful of who you ask to take on that role while creating a culture of welcome, where I don't want to have to staff every portion of the person coming in, but rather create a culture of hospitality. And I think that's an important delineation as well.
It is. I like that, a culture of hospitality. And you guys, I've said before, every church was a church plant at some point. Everybody has to start somewhere. And so if you're a 150-year-old Baptist church, you had a beginning at one point. You had an origin. And so we all start somewhere. And so creating that culture, that welcoming, inviting, hospitable culture. But like you said, there's a balance. There's a fine line between welcoming and smothering and overwhelming and almost feeling desperate. Like, oh my gosh, we're so glad people showed up. Oh my gosh,
thank you for being here. I always think of Janine on Ghostbusters when she hits a button and screams, "We've got one." I don't know if you remember that in the old school Ghostbusters. And it's like, I tell my people, don't be Janine. Don't like just latch onto people again. Cause if you're not aware, that's weird. Don't, be welcoming, ask questions, be helpful. I think that's one of the keys that even in hospitality, part of being hospitality is quickly helping people to understand next steps, And so I think your signage, even as a portable church, is hospitable. Having clear signage, letting people know where to go, how to go, strategically placing people to help guide them along the way. Because, I'm the type of person, if I don't see a preview for a movie, I'm less likely to want to go because I'm apprehensive of not knowing what to expect, at least in an idea. I'm fine to be surprised when I'm there. But I think a lot of churches, so we try to incorporate pictures of our worship environment, even if it's not like the coolest environment, just so there's some visual recognition so it doesn't feel so other when they get there, because there's a lot to take in when going into a new place. And some people love the adventure, but a lot of people, especially if they've had bad experience with church or they've been hurt by the church or whatever, the more you can diffuse of the mystery of the logistics of what happens, I think the more you're able to serve people in the care of their soul as they come in.
That's good. And you mentioned in passing being portable. I think you guys are both portable. I want to touch on portable environments where it comes to signage. I've been in so many churches, working with churches where they have the banners that pull up and stay in place, and then they have to create these kids environments with you may be in a school or movie theater, and you've got these classrooms from school that look stale and sterile, and that you turn into happy, colorful, nice looking kids environments with the soft floor and the decorations. And I've seen all kinds of stuff. But touch on creating a welcoming environment in a portable situation, and then also even practical, how you would do like a check-in for kids, and how even software. What do you use to create a welcoming environment visually, and then also logistically, signage, and practically checking in kids? Let's dive into that. Josh, start us off. How do you overcome a portable environment?
Yeah, I think one of the things that was really helpful for us, kind of as how we designed it, was our team really at the beginning of our church sat down. This was probably 6 years or so. And we made a list of all the questions, concerns, all the things that are running through a guest's mind when they show up. Like things that, and because what we wanted to try to do was we wanted to just think through their eyes and be able to answer some of their questions and concerns before they got there. Things like, how long is the service going to be? Where do my kids go? Where are the bathrooms? And so we wanted to design our church in a way that a guest could come and navigate it without having to ask anybody. I've been to churches, and you probably have too, Greg, where you can't even find the front door. You pull on the campus and you're like, I have no idea where to go. And so we meet in a high school, and in Arizona, the schools out here are really open. All the doors open to the outside. There's a big courtyard area. And so, we actually switched the schools that we meet in because one of the schools that we met in just was not very hospitable when you walked onto its campus. And I think one of the things that people really overlook in a portable situation is, what does it feel like when I walk onto the campus? Like the one school that we met at had these really high fences, and it almost felt like a prison yard. And so that just screams not friendly. Yeah. And so you have to be really aware of that when you're in a portable situation, of not just how cool does the room look that we're in, or is this a good location, but what does it feel like when you walk onto the campus? Because that can really work against you if you're not aware of it. And so for us, I mean, we have signs that begin, we made a 5-mile circle around where we meet, and all the neighborhoods that are around the school we meet in, we found people in our church there. And on Fridays, they stick out A-frame signs about where our church meets. And so from Friday through Sunday, just over the weekend, in a 5-mile radius, you'll see just a ton of signs everywhere, talking about our church and where it meets. And then they disappear on Sunday, so it's kind of like coming out of the fog, and but then when you get on the campus, I mean, we have A-frame signs everywhere on the campus, just directing where people go, where the bathrooms are, where the auditorium is. Right when you walk onto the campus, when you walk into the courtyard, we have a table. It's our first family check-in table. We have a big sign that says, that if this is your first time as a family, this is where you go first. And we've staffed that with really friendly people and one of the things that they do then is they walk that family back to the kids area, and and we've trained that team, here are 5 questions to ask people as you're walking back. Because it's awkward. But I remember when I did student ministry, I told our leaders, we brainstormed 5 questions when you walked up to a middle school or high school student. And because we wanted to communicate, we're going to stay here. Like, we're interested in you. And just having some of those questions prepared for your teams just takes a lot of the guesswork out of it for people. If you're an introvert, it makes it way easier. Because it is weird to walk next to somebody and you're like, I don't know what to say right now, but I'm really glad you're here. Yeah. And I'm walking you because Josh told me I had to show you instead of point the way. And that just helps them then. So
that's good. That's good. I'm just thinking back over the last 3 months. I've worked with 3 church plants in portable environments. 2 were in high school. One were was in a middle school. I mean, a movie theater, sorry, an active, live, working movie theater. It's funny, the pastor, after the service, the pastor was taking me on a tour of the church, and he was walking through a room upstairs, and he said, this is where our young couples meet. We have a young adult group that meets up here, and then we cut through the back of a movie theater to walk through to the other room for him to show me, and we cut through this room, and they were showing 50 Shades of Grey as we were walking through. It was a live, active movie theater, and we were walking through to another.
Oh, man.
Said, let's just keep going. Let's just keep going.
But, you had to repent. You had to manually enter into your covenant eyes. Yeah.
I had to manually enter it in. Yeah.
Manually enter it in. Hey, guys, this isn't going to show up. But
man.
I remember one of the high schools this year, I could not tell where the entrance was. They had a guy that came around in a golf cart picking up people to take them around to the side entrance. But if that golf cart was gone taking somebody, you wouldn't know that if you went straight ahead past this big sign that you could also get to where the auditorium is. And so I had to wait for the golf cart. And as he took me there, and as I walked back on my own, I could tell, I could have just got there through here. I didn't need to ride a golf cart, but people can be overwhelmed. The other thing I think of is when I'm out consulting, I like to check the restroom, because during the week, that was a middle school boys' restroom, and It is not clean. It does not smell good. It does not look good. And so you guys have some unique challenges. Casey, tell us about life in a portable environment as a church plant. How do you make it welcoming?
Yeah, so a couple of things that we've done is we've created some cool looking carts, like for our hospitality table and stuff like that double as crate holders or cart hold, like the small material crates. So working smarter on aesthetics for your crates, so they're multi-purpose is really helpful in a portable environment. So get some guys that know how to build nice looking things. Cause I think we're a tendency to go like get the black carpeted crates and then move them on. But I think there's some cool stuff you can do to where they double as like a furniture piece to create an environment there. As Josh said, signage is very important, and to where like my 5-year-old who can read now can make her way through where we're going. Speaking of the prison thing, our current entrance at the school we're at is a prison gate looking entrance. And so we have nice flags leading up to it. We have greeters there. We make light of it and laugh about it on the stage. We leverage that in our community to raise money for a facility. I mean, we're like, hey, one day we won't have to enter the prison gate any longer. But as we look at, different entrances. So, I mean, there's certain places where, there's give and take as you're looking at an environment. We've looked at changing the entrance, but then it makes security concerns for our kids. And so one point I want to make, especially for us down here in the South, is security concern. That people, I mean, down here, everybody has their own arsenal, and, at our church, everybody has a CHL. And so, they're going to end up shooting each other if a gunman comes in, because it's going to be crossfire from everybody shooting. We actually have a policy of how we'll handle that. But in all seriousness, so we pay for a sheriff's deputy each week to be at the entrance to elicit some support and sense of safety for visitors primarily. I mean, obviously we've got some off-duty police officers that come to our church and stuff like that, but we have a visible thing, one, to deter problems, but also to, more importantly, to elicit a sense of security, especially when you're in a school environment that is, ad hoc, even if it looks friendly and nice. We use Planning Center for our login. We, again, have some crates that we've built that load all of our gear in. We use iPads for registration, and then wireless printers that we've just purchased before we were hardwired. And then we collect everything into Planning Center, which helps. And we've done that since pretty early on. We've grown to larger, more 3 or 4 centers now where they can log in, because our church is 39% children 5th grade and younger. So out of 250 people, about 100 of them are children, or 80. So there's a lot of kiddos. And, and as far as, creating a welcoming environment, I think, ultimately children, the visual stimulation is important early on, but really having trained volunteers who care for the kiddos and, help them have a good time learning about Jesus, I think goes a real long way. And so, I've been to church plants that I've worked with before that have spent thousands on really cool equipment in a portable environment, but their people haven't really been trained on how to engage kids, or are just in there because they need babysitters. And I think that, so for the person listening to this that may not have the capital immediately to do that, you can make up for some of the things you might be immediately lacking by creating a safe and friendly and helpful environment. And then also presenting to your church that what I've heard some specialists say, and Greg, you're more of a specialist than I am, I'm more of a practitioner, but that people will often come to a church if they like the preaching, and if they have their opportunities for them to get plugged in, then they'll stick around for a bit. But one of the number one reasons people leave is because of the children's ministry, and especially those who have children in that age group. And so I think as far as being hospitable, because, the circles that we run in, we have some people that are, want to be family integrated. They've read Voddie's books and are, hook, line, and sinker. And the way I articulate to them, I'm like, your kids are welcome in the service. If that's what you want to do, no problem. But our philosophy of ministry for children's ministry, one is kids matter to God. And 2, it's a matter of hospitality, that if we're inviting people who are not yet connected to Jesus, in our community and culture, that's what you have and what you do. And so we use curriculum like the Gospel Project to be sound doctrine and helpful. But, it's hospitality for me, like it's a qualification for being an elder, right? Welcoming to strangers. And that's something that I take very seriously as we think through our kids, as we think through, coffee. I don't even buy like generic bottled water. I learned that from my pastor, Chuck Land, in Sugar Land back in the day. It's like, if we're having like an outreach type thing, we don't buy Dr. Thunder. We buy the real deal, and spend the 7 extra cents or whatever. And some people, that might be over the top, or like you're missing the boat. But in our context and our culture, yes, water's wet no matter what it is, but a brand name as opposed to Walmart's Sam's Choice drinking water, which means they literally have a tap that they're putting out of, that communicates subtle things that you have to be mindful of.
It does. It does. That's good. That's good. That's good stuff. Don't get the Dr. Thunder.
Don't get Dr. Thunder, man.
No, that's good. That's good.
Oh, man.
Hillside Dew? No, get Mountain Dew, man. I mean, come on.
That's right. Yeah, I like
Buy Coke, not Pepsi. I mean, things like that.
You touched on a couple things that are very important that we covered with the First Impressions Conference. We had actual breakouts. Like this is a breakout panel discussion on church planning, but we had one on children's ministry because it is huge and it's a big reason why people come back or not. And then we had several sessions on security. You talked about being a deterrent and then also putting minds at ease. That's a big, big part of First Impressions. Do people feel safe? Do they feel secure? I've said for years with children's ministry, it needs to be clean, safe, and secure. And so creating these welcoming environments is huge. What I love about this is, I work with pastors around the country, but there's two that come to mind recently in this past year that have had anniversaries. They're churches that are trying to revitalize, and there's a youngish 40-something-year-old pastor that has come into an existing church and is trying to lead them into the future. And one just celebrated is getting ready to celebrate their 75-year anniversary. And then the other had an anniversary last year, and I helped him with that. They were like 125 years old. And
wow.
I talked with a church this week that was getting ready to celebrate 75 years. And they said, how would you do it? I said, every church was a church plant. Find the old pictures, find the pictures of the charter members and what the auditorium used to look like, and tap into their heart, their vision, their pulse. They were pioneers. They were planters. They wanted to reach their community. I said, reach back 75 years to where they were pioneers and church planters, and tap into that same heart and vision and propel forward for the next 75 years. And so I love this.
Unless it's a nasty church split, right? If it was a nasty church split, then you want to say like, hey, God makes beautiful things out of dust. You sing that, show a few pictures, and then move on. Yeah. So
what's cool is though, this is where it starts. You have to create that welcoming culture. With I think a portable environment. Sometimes people say, or if we could just get a building, then we would grow. It's as if we just had a building, then we would be welcoming all of a sudden. If we just had a building, then we would have greeters, then we would have ushers, then we would have the right signage, and we would have children's ministry systems in place and check-in. And my thing is, if you're not doing it portable, what's going to change when you add brick and mortar and a building? And so this is where it starts. I want to touch on something that I think a lot of church planners can relate to. And Josh, we could start with you. Overcoming that size barrier. You started with 11 people. I've talked before in my Facebook group about what I call the intensity of density. People like to feel like it's packed, it's crowded, this is the place to be. But when you look across a elementary school cafeteria or a middle school auditorium with 700 seats, you've got 11 people in there. How do you overcome that factor? Do you do things like pipe and drape? Do you shrink the room to make it a little smaller? How do you overcome this size challenge?
Yeah, I mean, we have used pipe and drape in the past. A lot of it too. We're in a room right now and have been for the last several years where we have to set up and tear down the chairs. And so, because we actually meet in like the cafetorium of the high school.
That's what they're called. Yeah.
And so the school that we're in now, it has a stage in the lunchroom, but it has 3 levels then. And so we're really particular about how many chairs we put on each level. So that way we're trying to pack people in and make them feel like they're not kind of down in the pit, basically. And so a lot of it just has to do with thinking through the number of chairs you're going to put up if you set up chairs, and just being okay with, hey, this room could have 500 chairs in it, but we're going to put 150 in it. And talk about that, and I still remember, and we'll do it at different times throughout the year where we just talk about the empty seats in the room, and we'll just talk about, hey, you know what, like we set up this many chairs for this reason. And just talk about the seats that are empty. And so that's how we've done it. over the years, and just tried to navigate that.
That's good. Casey, how do you overcome that size barrier starting with 20 something people? How do you overcome that small feeling in a large room possibly?
Embrace it first. Just be like, it is what it is. And, cast vision of where you hope to go. And for us, it's about making disciples, not just filling seats. And so we want to, we just kind of communicate the significance of reaching people and inviting people and connecting with people. But like Josh says, we calculate through, okay, our average, we have 25 people, then we're going to set up probably 70 chairs, give or take, because some of our Baptists like to sit in the back row. So you need, your first few rows are dead rows. Pipe and draping around the whole thing is what we did in our first environment, and created kind of a snug environment. People feel more free to worship and engage in that environment. I think it's I've been places before where they're acting way larger than they really are. And, it's like, I think that's condescending to people. And I think people are more inclined to accept the state of where you really are, and than to act like you're way bigger. So I think, confining the room, I think, if you're preaching to a group of 25, preach to a group of 25, don't preach like you're preaching to 1,000. And you adjust your communication skills. You remain positive. Like, man, it's so great to have, over 20 of us here today. Really excited to see how God grows this thing. We love, for you to invite your neighbors and friends. And, we want to build this church through the context of relationships with God and with each other. Cast that vision, keep going.
That's good. I like the part, because I resonate with it. It's the way I've tried to lead in my ministry, and that's remain positive. Always be optimistic, look towards the future. It's one of my strength finders, futuristic. Let's remain positive. Thank God for these 25 people. Imagine
when the grave's empty, right? So we have hope. I mean, even if there's only 17 people, and it's mercy either way. Ultimately, if you dwindle down from 17 to 10, at least but I know guys like Josh who, have like 2/3 of your church leaves. He picks it up and relocates to a different location, saying, God has called us, and you lead through that. So I don't think a reduction in number necessarily is like, we got to shut this thing down. I think it's just acting your size, acknowledging what it is. I know about a year into our church plant, we were struggling so much. We grew by a lot of kids, and we're struggling to get a lot of children's volunteers each week. So we killed children's ministry, which is like a church planter fear factor. We had children's ministry through pre-K, and then we set up a table in the back that had crayons and colors and everything else. And we just said, until we have a healthy, sustainable way to add on grades, we're not going to do that. And so some guys, like first impressions, like, oh my gosh, people won't stay, boom, boom, boom. But what we had is people come in, they loved the vision, and they said, well, hey, we'd love to serve one week, so when you're ready to add kindergarten, first grade, we'd love to take responsibility twice a month to start. And so we rebuild that way without burning out our volunteers. So I think yes, first impressions, but I also think act your age and act your size. Like, if you're killing your volunteers trying to look like a church of 200 when you're a church of 30, then I think that's a mistake as well, right? Yeah, you may want to grow to 30, but hey, what's the next benchmark? 25, and then 50, and then 75 and 100, and then 125 and 250. If you follow like Searcy's growth model, whatever, begin preparing for that next level of growth, but don't go far beyond that.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. As we finish out, let's touch on just briefly training volunteers, raising up leaders. The reason I love talking with lead pastors, and the reason that I love pouring into this Facebook group is there's a lot of lead pastors in there, and on Sunday you've got a sermon to teach and to preach, and so you cannot be in every place. And that's the way I love the body of Christ and the way a local church functions. You can't greet, and you can't usher, and you can't lead the music, and you can't watch the kids. You have to focus on the sermon, which means you have to build teams, and you have to equip leaders, and you have to empower leaders. And so when you're starting out, both you have a few years behind your belt of planning, but when you did start out, how did you go about identifying people this person would be good over hospitality. This person could oversee greeters and ushers. Josh, how did you start training and equipping people so that you could release it and focus on what only you can do, and that's teaching of that day?
Yeah, I think one of the things that most lead pastors make the mistake on is they take somebody who's a really good greeter and make them in charge of the greeting team. And so I think you really need to identify what is the difference between being awesome on this team and leading this team. And so, because it's totally different, you have to be able to recruit, schedule, have a system that takes care of all the materials that you use. Like, so for us in the high school, like, we totally transformed the bathrooms. We have towels that there's a team of people who wash every single week and then fold them. And we have all these nice soaps, and we have one soap that's like a hyperallergenic soap for people who have skin allergies. And so, but if you just take somebody who's just an extroverted, like, hugger, they might not be gifted in the administrative side of that team. And so I think you need to understand the difference between this is what it means to lead it, and this is what it means to be on it. And I know for me, the longest time, I really pushed people to be leaders when they weren't, and to just say, hey, you know what? Like, it's okay if you're just a really good member of the team. And so I think that's a first thing. One of the things that we've done at our church that has been huge is, every team, gathers together and prays together before Sunday morning. The kids leaders do it, hospitality, the band, all that. Well, we stagger those circles so that I can be in each one on a Sunday morning.
That's good.
And, because we've just seen the power of just my presence in that circle, of being able to every week just say, hey, thanks so much for being here. Thanks for what you're doing. Being able to share a celebration from last week. So like this Sunday, I'll be able to say, hey, you know what? Like, somebody took the step of following Jesus last week, and that happened, because of just what's happening at our church, how God is using us. Being able to remind people that every week it's somebody's first Sunday at Revolution Church. 2 weeks ago, I was able to say, hey, we had 10 guests last week. I mean, that's incredible. And just being able to celebrate that and thank people. And then for me as the pastor, to pray for them, like, we'll have other people in the circle pray, but then for me to be able to pray, and pray for people by name, depending on the size of the circle, of, when I'm able to circle up with, kids small group leaders or student small group leaders. And so I think because I'm an introvert, and I love, like Casey said, being behind a stage and not having to interact with people. Like, it's not my gift set to interact with people. So I really have to put my extrovert hat on when I show up on a Sunday morning and walk around and say, hey, you know what? Like, my presence really matters. And I think a lot of lead pastors, out of fear of, well, I don't want to elevate myself to be, that important. And it's not that at all. It's just that your presence is a big deal. And don't underestimate that. Don't underestimate what it means for you to stand in a circle with kids volunteers and pray with them. Like, don't underestimate that. That's huge. Same with your setup and teardown team. Your presence just makes a big difference, and because it multiplies out then. And so, I don't know that we have this great training system. I mean, outside of the fact that we're making everybody watch your First Impressions conference, and but the weekly training that I'm able to do, because when we're in that circle, then I'll just remind them of one of our values of our church, and it's just a really short, so it's not a big, long thing, but it's just this continual cycle that we're going through then on a Sunday morning with our volunteers.
That's good. You hit on three things that I want to point out. One, your presence speaks to importance as well, that, hey, I'm going to circle up with the kids leaders because I think kids ministry is pretty important. I'm going to circle up with the teardown team because I think they're pretty valuable and important. I'm going to circle up with the hospitality team because I think this matters. And so your presence matters. You talked about expressing values. You ooze the DNA. You infuse the DNA of, here's our vision, here's our values. Every Sunday, somebody's first Sunday. So you're letting that come out, and then you hit pure gold that I hope everybody watches this video, church plant or not. You can't just take your best greeter, friendliest person, and make them the head of the greeter team. They have to be a leader. That's so good. That's so good. They have to be an equiper and a leader and somebody that can administrate and schedule and organize. Not just, they're so friendly. Bob is so friendly. He's the friendliest guy in the world. Let's put him over greeters. That's pure gold. I mean, I want to tell everybody to watch this just for that nugget. Casey, how do you do this in your situation? Training volunteers, casting that vision, raising up leaders so that you can preach and somebody else can oversee these teams.
Yeah, do what Josh says on that. It's always fun to follow after pure gold because I might be able to get a rusty copper piece or something in there. But I a lot of what Josh says is absolutely right, and infusing vision into why they're doing that, because I think you can get volunteer fatigue, especially when they lack vision of why they're doing it, right? When it takes you an hour and a half to set up, an hour and a half to tear down, and your service goes an hour 15, it's easy to lose vision as it pertains to that. I think also the more you're able to develop position focus sheets of what the end result looks like, what winning looks like, what your expectations are clearly articulated. Because as lead planter, when you're early on, you're dealing mostly with volunteers, not a staff. You want a third party to be the jerk if it has to be, which is the piece of paper that they've agreed to. And so you sit down a position focus sheet and say, this is the job. These are the requirements. This is what I hope to see happen. Do you agree to this? Do you have questions about this? And then allow that grid to be what you review the process on, because you can say, hey, Bob, you're super kind and great with people, but do you acknowledge that these 4 things have not been completed on a weekly basis? Yes. So there's either a problem with the system or there's a problem with the people. And like Josh said, the gold, pure gold, I'll just take gold and just continue to amplify that. A person's good at something doesn't mean they need to lead something. Right. You might have someone who's not as great of a volunteer or great as an actual greeter, but are great with people, can capture the vision and can inspire people to move that direction, maybe can recruit, can model. They're decent, but they're really strong leaders. You want those people running point to free Bob up, because if Bob's super extroverted and outgoing, everything else, he's probably not the most organized dude on your team. And so you want to free Bob up to know, I need to show up at 9. You tell guys like Bob 8:55 because he'll be there at 9. And, you say, hey, go be Bob. And Bob is great at being Bob. Bob doesn't know how to replicate himself because it's intuitive to him. You find people that are teachable, trainable, and can replicate. That's the people you want to put in charge of those things.
Yeah. That's good. That's good. Well, we're about to wrap up. Any closing thoughts? You don't have to, but Josh, Casey, if there's anything you want to leave people with of, hey, don't forget this, any closing thoughts?
Yeah, I would say, Casey had mentioned it earlier, be okay with where you are. If you meet in a school, that's just where you meet right now. If you meet in a movie theater, think through, how do we maximize the space that we're in? That's the space that God has placed you in. He put your church there. He needs he wants your church in that spot. And, and it may be for 10 years, 5 years. But think through, how do we maximize where we are? There's a lot of good that can come from that. You got to be really creative with that. You got to really stretch dollars with that. But like you said, Greg, having a building, it isn't the magic bullet. That's not gonna make it for your church. And so just be creative with that. Be okay with that. Embrace that. The rest of your church will feed off of that as a lead pastor and as a planter. And so if you're grumpy about it, everyone else is going to be grumpy about it too. So that's what I would say, as a church plant, and, and embrace your size too. There are a lot of people who are looking for a church of 200 people. That's what they want. They don't want a church of 5,000 people. Right. They want that smaller feel. And so embrace that. Be okay with that. Your church may grow to be 5,000 one day, or you just may be what you are for the rest of your ministry. And that's okay too.
Yeah, that's good.
One word, Kaizen, constant improvement. You may not be where you want to be today, but you can make efforts to go there soon. And one of the ways we do that in our weekly review with my team now is we have a Trello board that we use to review Sunday. And one piece that we have is set up an environment that we capture things that we think might be able to be improved or need to be worked on, and that's part of our weekly review. And as we review the previous Sunday, we constantly make small improvements, micro improvements, and some may just need to be reviewed quarterly. Some may need to be reviewed annually or during the holidays. And so, don't feel this pressure to immediately disrupt everything that's going on, but make it a priority to make sure your environment is a welcoming environment.
That's great. Both of you, pure gold. All right. Thank you.
I'm fine to be silver, by the way. That's okay. I'm fine.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Greg.
Yep.